I feel incredibly privileged to be in this job. Simply put, this is the most exciting sector to be in right now. Energy also brings together key policy areas that I've cared about for the whole of my career: investment, jobs, and economic growth, net zero and the wider environment, and helping disadvantaged families and communities, something that I've always been passionate about. We cannot thrive as a country without affordable, reliable, abundant energy. We can't prosper or protect our population without energy security. And our children will not be able to flourish if we don't decarbonize energy and ensure that the whole ecosystem survives intact for the next generation. That's a huge responsibility on all of our shoulders. So as the new Secretary of State, my pledge is to work with you as closely as possible, to listen, and to make sure that our ambitions chime with your capacity to deliver and grow. In fact, I've already spoken to hundreds of you since taking up the job to make sure that we are changing policy with the realities that you face in mind. I feel enormously optimistic about the energy sector. At a local level, it's supporting millions of jobs around the country. Offshore wind jobs in Humber, Cornwall, and East Anglia, nuclear jobs in Somerset and Suffolk, oil and gas jobs in Scotland, and jobs throughout the supply chain. Energy is helping revitalise communities that played an instrumental role in Britain's industrial growth. Yet some of these areas have declined for much of the 20th century. And it's increasingly important for us to think long-term in terms of the rising global instability that we're facing, at a time when much of the world is, like us, transitioning to clean energy. So when I've looked at this as a whole, I can't help but feel that this is the most important sector when it comes to changing our world for the better, and I know that you will feel like that too. So it's fitting that we're in this building today, the home of the Institution of Civil Engineers, where so many great energy figures from history are celebrated. From famous names like Watt and Faraday, to less well-known figures like John Smeaton, for example, who's commemorated here with his own room. He was a man who could be described as one of the fathers of renewable energy. 250 years ago, Smeaton was designing groundbreaking water wheels and windmills that turned natural energy into motion, transforming production of food and textiles and paving the way for the Industrial Revolution. He reminds us that the energy pioneers of the past not only had brilliant minds, but they had great timing too. They had the opportunity which presents itself when creative minds meet eras of phenomenal progress. Those transitions don't happen very often. You might think of the Renaissance or the Industrial Revolution, but now we are on the brink of perhaps the most important transition of all, when centuries of change are being compressed into years. And what's exciting for me is that Britain has the potential to shape this transition and see this opportunity through our own innovation and investment. Of course, I'm very conscious of what other countries are doing to stimulate green investment, particularly in the US and Europe. I've made investment my top priority, and I've tasked my department to prioritize those decisions that I know you'll all need. We're looking across government at how we can further accelerate investment into our green industries, and we are making exciting and ambitious investments, like the £20 billion that we set out for carbon capture storage. No other technology offers Britain better or more exciting potential for our green energy future than carbon capture right now. We'll succeed in the energy transition if only we can double down on the sectors with the greatest opportunities. And make no mistake, carbon capture and storage is one of those. But we're also investing in our world-leading offshore wind sector, delivering enough offshore wind to power the equivalent of every home in Britain by 2030. I know many of you will want to hear from me that I am committed to a successful AR6. I spend a lot of time talking to people and thinking about it. And I want that round to include offshore wind, and I want it to be a round in which sustainably priced projects will be able to compete. We'll be publishing the administrative strike price for the next round in November. And in addition, we're going to generate enough solar energy to power over 28 million electric vehicles by 2035. We're spending £700 million on fusion technology. We're backing space-based solar projects, and our nuclear revival is well underway. With Hinkley Point C in Somerset set to provide enough secure low-carbon electricity to power around 6 million homes, and Sizewell C in Suffolk is going to feature the most powerful electricity generators anywhere in the world to supply another 6 million homes. We've also, as you'll all know, launched Great British Nuclear to deliver our programme with its first priority to accelerate the development of small modular reactors. And as we announced the other day, we've chosen 6 companies to progress the next competitive stage to design and build the UK's first SMRs. And bringing all that work together is the energy bill, and it's a very timely day for me to make this speech because we've got another stage of that in the House today. That is our vehicle for delivering the energy strategy, to turbocharge British technology, to liberate £100 billion of private investment, scaling up green jobs and growth, and to make Britain energy secure. Yet I also recognise that there have been profound challenges, from COVID to Ukraine and the shocking events of the last few weeks. It's been an uncertain few years for the energy industry, for families and households, and yes, for governments too. You've told me about the issues you face and what we need to do to lead the energy transition. Many of you have spoken to me about the practicalities of how we can unclog the system and give you as long a lead time as possible. As you already heard earlier, Nick Windsor has been advising us on how we can best do that. But the most important announcement that we've made recently is prioritising those grid connections and making sure that we're putting in place the reforms to infrastructure and planning that I know you'll all need. I'm acutely aware that although we're investing tens of billions of pounds in new energy projects, we don't yet have that grid infrastructure to bring that energy to households and businesses. At a time of rising demand, when we need increased electrification at pace, it takes too long to build new grid connections, so we're going to introduce comprehensive reforms. We'll set out the UK's first ever spatial plan for infrastructure to give you more certainty. We're going to speed up planning for the most nationally significant projects, and we're going to raise the bar to enter the queue and make sure those who are ready first will connect first. The holistic network design, published by the electricity system operator, is a blueprint for the connection of over 20 gigawatts of offshore wind. We strongly supported Ofgem's accelerating strategic transmission investment decision at the end of last year, allowing £20 billion to accelerate for key transmission projects. To speed up the consenting process for new network infrastructure, the government has consulted on revised energy national policy statements, and we're bringing forward means to boost development consent, including a fast-track process. As you heard earlier, Nick's been advising us on this deployment process so that we can further ramp this up with an ambition to halve delivery times. And I'd like to thank him for all his work. And following his report, we will be publishing an action plan by the end of this year. Releasing network capacity will help reduce connection times, and we're creating a future system operator to sit at the heart of the energy system, looking across different fuels and technologies to plan the network and increase competition. All of this work, I'm hoping, will streamline planning and delivery and tackle the complexity and fragmentation of the current process. Above all, I want to assure you that nothing will distract us from achieving net zero or driving forward with renewables. This country has led the world on tackling carbon emissions, and we're going to continue to do so. Of all the major economies, we've set the toughest targets, and thanks in no small part to all of you, we have met them every single time. We've cut our emissions in half over the past 30 years. We've boosted our share of renewables from just 7% in 2010 to almost half today. We're third in the world for attracting investment in clean energy, which is a pretty incredible achievement if you think about our size. But to realise those ambitions, we have to ensure that our energy plans are viable. And that is what the Prime Minister's Net Zero speech was about last month. We were trying to set out a pragmatic approach to make sure that we can deliver effectively, taking consumers and industry with us whilst we decarbonise. I know, like businesses across the country, you'll want certainty. However, I would say that policies which can't command public support won't give you any kind of certainty, and we've seen that in Europe. A target to decarbonise the grid by 2030, something that no other country has said it will do, and which many of you in this room will not believe is doable, doesn't give you certainty. And making sure that we don't have enough supply of things like oil and gas, leaving us dependent on foreign regimes, decimating the same communities, workers and skill sets that you will need in renewable energy in the future, that won't give you certainty either. We have delivered the most decarbonisation of any major economy through careful planning and using the best of government in partnership with the innovation and enterprise of industry and the market. Furthermore, we've set the most ambitious targets in the G7 when it comes to 2030. We're hoping to reduce our carbon emissions by 68%. That compares to the EU, which is 55%, and the US, which is 40%. And we are intent on doing the hard yards of making sure that we can meet those targets. So rather than setting targets for target's sake, and I set out why I think that's a short-term way of thinking, we have a long-term plan to make sure that families and businesses have the certainty that they need. But the truth is we can't impose unaffordable extra costs on households, particularly at a time when millions of families are struggling with the cost of living. Instead, we need to bring consumers with us on the net zero journey. I want people to feel nothing but unadulterated optimism when they think about what net zero means for them, the country, and their children's futures. We're absolutely committed to those targets, but we're going to do that in a way that's fair to family finances. We also want a retail energy market which is resilient, competitive, and fit for the future. Most importantly, we want a retail energy market that's delivering for consumers. On that note, I welcome Ofgem's move to ensure consumers get the good service they deserve from their energy supplier and from the vulnerable customers that they're prioritising and protecting. You're going to hear more on that from Jonathan Brearley soon. But I also welcome the action which has been taken to end the wrongful installation of prepayment meters to vulnerable households. The responsibility is now with suppliers to stick to those new rules, whilst also innovating so that consumers benefit from cheaper renewable electricity and using their energy when demand is lower. Although energy bills have been steadily coming down, 55% now since the peak, we are going to be working closely with Ofgem to see how we can support those who are struggling. As you'll all know, we spent £40 billion last year protecting communities and businesses. This was one of the highest packages anywhere in Europe. And this year, for people on means-tested benefit, they will still be getting further support in terms of the £900 cost of living payment. We'll also be supporting people through the warm home discount, and we've, of course, raised benefits in line with inflation. Looking further to the future, we're going to reform markets so that they work with consumers much more effectively. But I know that rising costs have also hit the industry, particularly for materials and the cost of borrowing. We're doing everything that we can to reduce inflation, and from the 10.7% rate in the final 3 months of last year, the CPI is down to 6.7% in August, and we're expecting it to fall further still. But the imperative remains, we need to continue innovating and reducing costs as an industry if we're going to stay competitive as a country. Finally, as well as generating new green energy tomorrow, we have to make more efficient use of the energy we have today. Last winter, as we know, was incredibly difficult for millions of people, and we've already invested £6.6 billion in energy efficiency and clean heat this Parliament. We've launched a £1 billion drive to help more than 300,000 households in the most need to cut their energy bills by hundreds of pounds through the Great British Insulation Scheme. And we've committed to invest a further £6 billion between 2025 and 2028. The share of the homes in the highest bands has risen from 16% in 2011 to 47% in 2021, and we've introduced more generous grants for heat pumps. So grants available now under the boiler upgrade scheme have increased from £5,000 to £7,500 on Monday next week, which will be amongst the most generous in Europe, which means that the first British customer now will be able to get a free heat pump under the scheme. So to sum up, let me tell you what you all already know. There has never been a more exciting time to work in energy. That's exactly why the PM created a standalone department to focus on energy security and net zero. Our ambitions on net zero are undiminished. We continue to have world-leading targets, and we will meet them with the help of the talent, the enterprise, and the innovation of the people in this room. I'm personally determined that the historic transition to a net zero economy, to an energy secure nation, is not only one that we can deliver, but it's one that we will deliver together. Thank you.